Welcome back to Blaster Toad's Game Academy, Class 101. Today we get our hands dirty and start working in blueprints. We're going to be making some characters move around the screen. So in our last video where we went over naming schemes and where to put things, we built ourselves a few pawns here. So you got a character type and a vehicle type that we've built. So we are going to give them some code, and we're also going to make a spaceship. So lots to cover here, so let's get started. First thing we're going to do before we open up these bodies or these pawns, we are going to go to our settings and set up input. We want to go over to Edit, Project Settings. Once that's loaded, we want to go to Input. And we have two different types of input we can do. We can have action or axes. So an action is a button press. This is on and off, digital, that's that. Okay, it is a yes or no. In actions, we are going to want to be able to jump. And later, we are going to want to be able to interact. Okay? So those are on and off events, jumping and interacting. Under axes, these are analog. These are a slider value, okay? So in axes, let's do our first one as walk. Okay, and then whereas the action maps, we're only gonna have one button there, on the axes, we're gonna have two for the most part. And we want to have a scale from 1 to -1. And then from here, we're going to select W or forward key and S or back key. If your keyboard is in a different setup, set up whatever keys make sense for you. I'm going to be setting this up as the standard FPS type layout. So in the case of an axis, we can think of it as a multiplier, okay? We are going to tell our character to take a step forward times 1. So we're going to take 1 step forward, multiplying that steps by 1. Or we can tell it to multiply the forward steps by -1. So now we're taking a step backwards. And that's how we can think of axes. They are just a multiplier saying, okay, go forward at this value up to a maximum of 1. Or go backwards at this value up to a maximum of -1. Let's add another axes map here. We're going to do strafe. And again, we want two inputs here. And I am going to do D and A. In this case, D will be our positive value, A will be our -1. Then we're going to want to be able to look around and turn. So I'm going to call this look/turn. And this one, we're only going to have one input, and we're going to put that to our mouse on the x-axis. So moving side to side is going to turn our character. And one more axis map, we are going to do pitch, or looking up and down. And we're going to put that on the mouse y-axis, right there. So moving up and down our mouse, or forwards and back versus side to side for turning. And jumping, I'm going to set up as spacebar right now. And while I'm in here, I'm going to set up my interact as the E key. So E as in echo. If you want to set that up separately, you can set your bindings up to whatever makes sense for you and your input layout. You can also do gamepad bindings in here, whatever you want to use. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, let's exit that and open up our player character. So in our player character here, we've got a capsule component that is going to be our player. Well, let's flesh that out just a little bit. So we're going to go over to our components tab. We are going to add a cube. Then I'm going to click out here in the cube in the viewport. And I'm going to hit R to scale. And I'm just going to move it inside of that capsule. And make it a little taller. There we go. That will be our player. And then we're going to add another component. We're going to add a camera. And I'm going to pull that on top of the cube so it's outside. Okay. And then I'm going to hit this little return arrow to resize it back to standard. And now clicking in the viewport on our camera and hitting W to translate or move. I'm going to move that up to what I figure eye level would be and just pop it out the front of that there. Perfect. So that is our player character. What a handsome fellow. Okay, and we're going to hit compile and save. We're going to go over to the event graph now. Now something I like to do just to keep things nice and tidy is we could have everything here on the event graph. We could have, okay, movement over here, taking damage over here, managing falling over here, getting in and out of a vehicle over here, and it could get really messy. Or we can go to graphs just over here and we can create a new graph. I'm going to make one called movement. So now everything movement related I'm going to code here, and then I could have a damage one and an interaction, and we're going to get to those later. So now that we have that movement graph made, and we're out here, and I'm just right-clicking and dragging to move that grid around, we're then going to right-click and release, and type in walk. And the same thing for all these axes we made. So we want strafe, because we made a strafe action. For axes, we want jump action event. And we want look or turn. And we want pitch axes. Axes. Ugh, words. Not my friends today. I am going through this a little quicker because I have now, as I said in the first video, done this multiple times and had different issues. So, please forgive me if I'm going through this a little quick, as I'm getting tired of re-recording these. Okay, so now that we have all these inputs out here, we are going to start making them actually do something. So walking, we are going to want to move forward and back. So we need to get what direction forward is. We've got a nice node for that, so we're going to right click and we're going to type in get actor, because everything is of type actor, forward vector. So this is what direction is forward of our player's orientation. Same thing with strafe. We want to get their sideways directions. We want to get actor right vector. Just like that. We're then going to pull off this little pin here, and we are going to add movement input. Right there. Add movement input. And if we right click on this pin again and hit straighten, it's going to keep everything nice and clean here. And then we need to plug in two things. So the world direction, well, it's whatever's forward of our character. And the scale at which it moves on that is going to be our axes value. And then we're just going to pop this in a little bit. And there we go. Same thing down here. So we're going to pull off, add movement input. We're going to right click. Come on. Work for me, baby. There we go, straighten. And then you're going to line it up with this one, and then in our direction, and in our scale. Just like that. And then we can click over here and drag. Ooh, not that far. But drag over these and hit C. And this is linear movement. We can comment on what each thing is doing. So that way when we want to get a brief overview, we know, oh, over here is linear movement, this is rotating movement, this is jumping, this is flying, and so on and so forth. Speaking of jumping, on jump, so when we press jump, we're going to pull off and hit jump. That's it. It's pre-built into our character. So we can click and drag, hit C, and jump. It is that easy on the character type blueprint. Then for our looking around, and I'm just going to pop those over a little closer here. For our look and turn, we are going to add controller yaw. Add controller yaw input. That's what we're looking for. Again, I'm going to right click on the pin and straighten, and then bring our axes value into value. Same thing for pitch. We are going to add controller pitch input. And then just straighten everything off and plug that in there. Then we're going to select C and rotational movement. There we go. Believe it or not, that is pretty much our character set up, and that is full movement. So what we need to do now is under class defaults, I do believe, yes. Under pawn, it says, hey, use the controller rotation yaw, which is great, because we are updating controller yaw. But it is not currently listening for pitch, so we want to, because we're changing the pitch here, have it listen for the pitch over here. Okay, this is actually going to rotate our whole character forward and backwards, but that is fine for our simple setup. And I'm going to hit save. And now, if we pull our player out into the world, we're just clicking and dragging out into our level. And what we want to do for testing is over in the details panel with our character selected, we want to type in possession, or possess, sorry. And auto possess player, we want to set to 0. So the first player that connects, we want to start controlling this. Okay. And now if we hit play, hey look, we're in our thing. We can look up and down, we can turn side to side, we can jump, and we can move around. Go figure, look at that. We're doing things. Woo! And there we go. That is all set up. Well, let's do things for a vehicle now. We're going to go to class vehicle. Open that up. And again, we're going to make a new graph for movement. Okay. And we're going to add some components to our vehicle. So we want to add a cube. We have a big boxy car. That's what we're going to do. And we're going to then pull cube and we're going to put it right at the root. And then we're going to add a component. We're going to add a camera. Something like that. Just pull the camera off to the side so it'll see the cube when we're moving. Okay. We're going to double click here to go to our movement graph. Oh, shows up here, sorry. And then we're going to add all our inputs again. So we want walk, strafe, turn or look, and pitch. And let's do jump just for good measure. Okay. So again, we're going to get forward vector for the actor. So get actor forward vector. Get actor right vector. We are going to add movement. This should all be looking very familiar. Plug everything in. Add movement. Plug it all in. Turn, we are going to add yaw for the controller yaw input. And then we are going to, on pitch, we are not going to do yaw input because we don't want our car tilting up and down. And instead, we're going to move our camera. So we're going to pull off our camera, pull it right into here. Oh, sorry. We're going to take our camera from here and just pull it in like that. And once we have the camera here, we're going to pull off the pin of the camera and we are going to add relative rotation. Straighten that. And then in rotation, we're going to right click and split. And then in pitch, we want to plug in our pitch. There we go. And this is going to move our camera up and down. Or rotate our camera up and down, sorry. And then in jump, because our car isn't going to jump, we are going to print string. And in there, we're going to say honk, honk. It is now our horn. Woo! Compile and save. I'm going to minimize here, drag out our car, put it there in the world, and then under our detail panels, we want to go back to possess. You can start searching possess in there, and we are going to set that to player 0. And then we want to click on our character, and we're going to set that to disabled. And then if we hit play, hey look, we're now in our car. And looking up and down works. None of our movement works though. Our turning doesn't work. What's going on? And if we hit the space bar, it does say honk honk. So we are taking control over it, but what is happening? We go back to pawns. Our character type has something pre-built in. So let's open that up. You see right here, character movement is built into it. It's part of it. However, on our car, it has nothing of the sort. What we're going to do is we're going to add a component that can work with these add movement inputs. So we want to add a pawn movement. So floating pawn movement. Okay, compile and save. And then the other thing we want to do is under class defaults, just like we set up pitch for our player character, we want to set up yaw for our car. So use controller rotation, yaw. We just want to click that yes. Again, compile and save. And now instead of going back and forth to the main screen, to our blueprints and back and forth, I'm going to hit beside the play button, I'm going to hit this little arrow, and we're going to hit new editor window. And look at that, it opens on top of everything, and we can turn and look up and down, and we can start moving forward, and we can move sideways. Our car is a bit of a mess with how it moves, but now we know how to get it moving across the screen. And if we hit space, it still says honk honk up there in the corner. Perfect. There we go. We have a car all set up. Kind of. It's a lame car with how it moves, but that is another way to get something moving. Okay. Now let's look at physics. So we're going to right click. We're going to do a new blueprint class, and we're going to do another pawn. We're going to call this one class underscore spaceship. Ooh, spaceships. Oh yeah. We're going to double click it. And again, we need to set up some components. We want to add a component. We are going to add, just so we know it's different, cone. Our spaceship is a cone. And then we're going to drag that off to the top so that it is the root. Okay. If we're actually building a game and trying to make these look pretty and have spaceships and whatnot, we would be putting in a mesh component, either a static mesh or a skeletal mesh. However, those only work once you've applied a mesh. And right now we don't have any fancy graphics to apply to them. So we're just going to use the cone and the cube for the car. What we do need to also add here though is a camera. We're going to do that. And same as always, we're going to move our camera back just like that. And this time we are not adding anything else here. What we do want to do though, however, is select our cone, either from our list here or clicking out in the world. And then this little tick box, simulate physics, we want to turn on, but we want to ignore gravity. So we're going to enable gravity, turn off. Perfect. Compile and save. And again, we're going to do a new graph. We're going to call it movement. And then we are going to, when we're in movement, do all our values again. So we're going to do walk, strafe, if I can spell things correctly, turn or look, and pitch. Okay, give those a bit of spacing, and then we want to get directions again. So when we're walking, we're still going to do forward and backwards input, so we are going to choose get forward vector for our actor. So get actor forward vector. Then we want a get actor right vector. Cool. So we've got those for our movement. Now for our turning, because we're no longer going to use the controller input, we're going to be turning around an axis, okay? So think if we put a pin in something and then we spin that pin, we're going to be turning around that pin. So if we want to turn side to side, let's go back to our viewport. If we want to turn side to side, we'd have a pin stuck right through the top, okay? Right through the top of our thing, so on this blue line, stuck right in there, and if we spun that blue arrow, it would turn side to side. So we want that up vector, so we want to get actor up vector, okay? And same thing if we wanted to pitch or look up and down, we'd want to stick an arrow right in its side, so like this green arrow here, and then if we spun that between our fingers, like putting a toothpick in a marshmallow and spinning the toothpick, it would look up and down. Or like a foosball player, they have a stick right through their side and they look up and down. So we're going to want to get actor right vector for looking up and down. Cool. Now we want to, from the side, grab our cone and pull that on over here. We're going to pull that out for each of these. We're then going to, from our walk, we want to add force. Okay. And, oh, it already gives us a pin for our cone, so I guess we can delete that. As long as we select cone there, we're good. If we didn't select cone, then we can pull the pin on our cone, okay? And then we want to see how much force we want to send it. Okay. Well, we want to send it force times positive or negative, but we need to give it a bit of force. So what we want to do is we want to take our forward vector and we want to multiply it. Multiply vector by float. And then again, we want to pull this out and we want to multiply. So I'm hitting Shift and 8 for the asterisk to multiply, and we want a vector by float. And we're going to plug that in there. I'm going to straighten that off, and then I'm going to straighten that off. And I'm going to say we want to do 100 force. 100 forces! And then we're going to tell it to do an acceleration change. Cool. And then we're going to take all this, we're going to hit Control C, we're going to click down here and hit Control V, as in vector, or violin, or victor. And then we're going to plug everything back in, just like it was. And then, of course, straighten things off. And that one is ready to go. Now, instead of adding force, because force is pushing something, we want to turn it or spin it now for looking up and down and side to side. So we want to add torque. And we're going to add torque in degrees. It's a lot easier to think in degrees than it is in radians, at least for myself. And then we're going to do the same thing here. We are going to do a multiply, so shift and 8, vector by float. And then we can control C, control V, do that again. Then plug it in, plug it in, plug it in. What was it? The air freshener? Plug it in, plug it in. Yeah. And then our turn, we don't want as aggressive. So instead of, what did we put in the value here? 100. For our turning, we only want a value of like 20. And we're going to set that up as an acceleration change. We want to make sure that's clicked on all of them. Okay. Acceleration change is going to basically force it to move, and it does not deal with how heavy the object is. Whereas if we uncheck that, it's going to say, okay, how heavy is it? Are we applying enough force to counteract how heavy the object is? We don't want to deal with that right now. And we're going to take this and we're going to go Control C and Control V to just paste it down below. We're going to plug it in like so. Something like that. And then straighten all these off. And there we go. If we hit compile and save. And again, we pull our spaceship out into the world. I am going to hit E to rotate and turn it around so I can get my bearings looking at the other things. And then we want to pull it up out of the ground. Like that. And then I am going to, since I still have possess here, if you don't, just again type in possess. We're going to get player 0. In our car, we're going to say disable auto possession. We're going to save. Actually, we are not saving our map. And then we're going to hit play. And if I turn, okay, I can turn side to side. I can turn up and down. I can start moving forward. If I push backwards, I start moving backwards, and same thing with side to side. So there is physics movement. Are you having fun yet? Are you not entertained? Sorry. Yeah. And same thing if you wanted to move up or down. We just add another axis input for our up vector. Okay? Or if we wanted to roll side to side, we could add torque to our forward vectors. We'd be rotating through a stick pointing right at our nose kind of idea. Okay, so that is movement in 3 different ways. I can't see us using a nudge movement in our project here, so I'm not going to go over that, because that would add yet another 8 to 10 minutes as well to this video. So we're just going to leave out the last type of movement for now. Or, you know, I'll give you a brief taste of it. Okay. So if we didn't want to use the movement component we did in our car, we could instead do an add. Now, not add movement, we want an add location. Not an add, we want not a location, we want a offset. That's what we want to do. We want to add actor local offset. And then we'd plug that in like that. And then we would do a multiply float by vector, vector by float, get our forward direction, and plug that in there. So now if I was to delete our pawn movement from our car, which remember, that didn't let us use add movement, well now if we nudge ourselves along, so we're just adding adding a movement, adding a forward step in its location. And we get into our world and we turn off possess on the spaceship. And we turn on possess on the car. Hit play. So now we can't move side to side because we've removed that part of the controls. But if we hit forward, we are moving forward by nudging or just updating the location of our item. Okay, by just updating the location. Instead of adding a pre-computed movement, we are now basically just taking the box and pulling it along with this tool, or pushing it along with this tool. It's just updating its location frame by frame. So yeah, those are the 4 different types of movement. And next time we are going to look at interacting with items. Now that we know how to move around the screen, we are going to interact with some things. Okay, yeah, let's leave this all set up. So we're going to get rid of this test thing we did in the car, and we're going to plug things in back how they were, and add our movement component again. Floating pawn movement, there we go. Compile and save. And we are going to make a new folder, so not under blueprints, but under content. We're going to make a new folder for maps. And we are going to save our map. So if we hit save out here, we're saving our map. I'm going to select our map folder, and we want to do this as a test map. There we go. We've now saved our test map now that we have things out there. So that is that. We'll see you in the next video when we start interacting with things. So I hope you're enjoying the series so far. You're learning lots. And next episode, we will look at blueprint interaction, getting things to talk to each other. So yeah, we'll see you then.